Admit it, at some point you've considered a Series 1 Lotus Elise. And who could blame you? It's one of the most analog experiences known to man, and it's a car so important, it revolutionized the sports car industry. Heck, it was even voted the top performance car of the last 25 years when we polled PHs back in 2023. So I thought now's the perfect time to do a buying guide on one. We're gonna go to Analogue Automotive, find out from the experts what you need to know about buying a Series 1 Elise, and have a go in this thing, the Supersport. We're here with Steffen Dobke, founder and CEO of Analogue Automotive. Steffen, thanks for taking the time to join us. I'm PH. Now, you started Analogue Automotive about 14 years ago, right? Back in 2011. What made you go, this is one of the best, most analog sports cars out there, and I'm going to make it better?
Probably a load of time owning them and driving them.
Yeah.
Famously sort of crashing and repairing them and setting them up mainly. That was always my thing, suspension-wise. Better-wise, every time I do something, don't want to put the same rusty old piece back. We try and make it nicer and as good as we can.
So you're known for the Supersport, which is it's an Elise S1, but has been pretty much meticulously gone over with a fine-tooth comb and improved in almost every single way. When did the idea of the Supersport come about? How did it all begin?
It probably from restoration. Back in the day, the cars were used Elises, S1s. I mean, I had mine and used it as a daily car.
Yeah.
That was very much just maintaining it. They were relatively new cars back then. As time goes on, when they're getting sort of 10 plus years old, that's when we started seeing some suspension work needed doing, and then you could upgrade stuff. As you upgrade stuff, it's a little bit of a snowball. It just keeps going. Then you want a bit more power, then you can do the brakes, then maybe the paintwork's getting a bit. So same sort of thing. Whenever we replaced something, you just wanted to turn it up a little bit, do it as best we could. And now these days, there's more modern equipment, modern techniques, modern finishes. Just makes it a much better car than it would have been in the 90s.
Absolutely. Well, we've got an incredible workshop here, and I thought before we go and do our walk around of the S1, we could have a little bit of a nose around it. So
yeah, please.
Obviously, the main focus so far is Elises.
Yes.
They aren't the only aluminium chassis car. We do have something very interesting here.
Yep.
I've acknowledged it. It's an owner. We can't really talk more about it, but it is extremely cool. But yeah, can you talk us through what's being worked on here?
Yeah, so this is pretty much Supersport build line in progress. Some of these cars are going to Goodwood this year.
Yeah.
Some are development cars for a car we're coming next year, which you might have a sneak peek at. But they're going all around the world. The silver one's going to Texas. The grey one, which is going to be a Goodwood car, that's a UK car, quite a high spec build, so that's had pretty much every box ticked at it. Got several at the body shop and probably 2 or 3 down the back that are in the sort of stripped down stages, so they're on bare chassis, dolly, ready to go to paint.
Incredible. And it's not just the Elise that you're working on as well, it's also 340Rs, Exesias too, so everything can
anything on that Elise platform. So since we've done the Supersport and got some press and known for that, we've got a 340R that's come from overseas. We've got another one downstairs, a UK guy, a couple of rare Sport 190s, Sport 160s, and about 5 S1 Exesias here as well. But they're either maintenance, one's in for restoration, and another one we're doing a conversion from a Honda engine back to a K-Series.
Absolutely. We're going to take a look at the Supersport a little bit later and kind of go over it with a bit more of a fine-tooth comb. But obviously kind of what you're known as is going over these cars and adjusting pretty much everything. When someone kind of brings an Elise here, is that the only service that they get, or can it be, I just want a little bit of a touch of Analogue Automotive here? Let's say I want the dampers done, or I want the brakes done. Yeah, bits and pieces.
No, we do. Yeah, we do the full spectrum. So obviously, being going for so long, we've got a back catalogue of customers who still come to us for servicing. So it's not just S1s, S2s, V6s. We'll do anything within the sort of Lotus range, really. But yes, to answer your question, we'll do anything from a minor service up to a full restoration to a full-blown build and anything between. So there's a maintenance side of stuff. Some of the things we might look at are, you might have had an Elise for a long time and not noticed that this is a problem or a potential problem, so we can maybe nip that in the bud before it happens.
Fantastic.
We'll go full bore and and do a build for you.
Awesome. So we've got a few cars here. These will ultimately end up as show cars, right, that we might see in the future at some point?
Yeah, so most of them are built. So again, that one's going to Texas. That should be finished sort of later this year.
Great.
That's another project we've got on, so it's a bit of a prototype project. That's a build for UK customer. That's the one that's not so much show car. That is going to...
That's a customer car.
Customers kind enough to let us. That's the first, will be the first UK car delivered. Funnily enough, most of the cars are overseas. So I said US, got a couple going to Far East, one to Japan. But yeah, that one he's allowed us to, because it's Goodwood, we're so close to Goodwood, to take that up the hill hopefully this year. And then again, other projects in build and some restorations as well.
There's one that we're not allowed to film.
Yes.
Or talk about.
Not just yet.
Which is this one here.
Yep.
Can we have like a little sneak peek?
Just
a little, maybe like
lift a skirt.
Lift the side up right there.
That's the colour.
It's purple.
That's
More on that at a later date, right? Yep. It's got a party piece. I can't wait to show it off. We'll come to that another point. Let's go through to the showroom in here, and kind of like just a collection of almost all the S1 Elises. So our focus today is going to be on the Series 1 Elise, but kind of what we're going to talk about applies also to the Exige and the 340R Series 1 as well, because they're all
the same chassis,
pretty much the same underneath, right? So in here we have, this is a 111S.
That's right, yep.
So this was kind of the top of the range of the more road-focused cars, if I'm correct. Yep. Which one have we got here?
That is, well, it's a Sport 135.
Sport 135.
Sport 135 head. Sport 190, which we've got two in here.
Yeah.
A Series 1 Exige, the Supersport, and then a bog standard-ish yellow Elise.
These two are really quite interesting though, because they're Sport 190s. Yeah. So how many of these were built? These are exceptionally rare.
I don't know if there's a firm number. I believe there's about 19 or 20 right-hand drive. Quite a few went to the States, the Sport 190s, and they were left-hand drive.
Yeah.
But they were just purely track cars, so I think maybe now they can road register them, but yeah, they're quite a rare car.
I don't think was the S1 officially sold in the US? 'Cause I don't think it was. I think it was a really rare. It's a really rare site.
You could import them as so the 190 went over there as a left-hand drive car, but it was not allowed to be on the road. I think you could do like cars and coffees, or sort of drive it to a track or something like that.
The show and display kind of rule that they've got.
Okay. Whereas nowadays they've got a 25-year rule, so as long as you're sort of compliant emissions-wise, which they're a bit touch and go, so maybe you won't see too many of those in California, but there are some over in the States. But they're quite valuable, and I know some people have imported those back into the UK.
Yeah. Just incredible. It's kind of a Lotus dream really in here, because I particularly love the Series 1 Exige. They're extremely rare. They sold thousands of the Elises, but the Exiges, I believe they only made 600 of them.
Yeah, it's in hundreds, yeah.
So ultra rare, and I've seen at least two here. I don't know how many you've got, but
got four. Yeah.
You've got four, right? Okay, so quite
actually,
a good chunk.
One's at Body Shop, but
of the ones that are remaining. So we have the car in question, really. This is the Series 1 Elise. Now, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it, is there anything, so let's say I'm a buyer and I've turned up to have a look at a Series 1 Elise. Is there kind of any quick identifiers of a good car or a bad car, ignoring the obvious, like it's sagging on one side or it's on fire?
Yeah, yeah, both are good things not to buy. Usually a lot of them have been well looked after. They were maybe, as I said earlier, daily cars for a little while.
Yeah.
One of their, they are a fiberglass car, which is just a skin over an aluminium chassis. Best will in the world with our weather. They can get some paintwork damage, and usually that shows itself as osmosis, which is the little bubbles in the paint.
Yeah.
If that's minor, and it's usually where you can, around the doors where water can get trapped, that's fine, it can be repaired. It can all be repaired. If it's everywhere, it is expensive. So I've turned down cars for donor cars or for cars that are restoration if it's too extensive, just because of the costs involved.
Really? Yeah. Wow, crikey. So it has to be quite a good quality car for it to be a donor for Supersport.
Yeah, just for, we're not buying, there are different levels. I'm not really worried about mileage so much, because the chassis are effectively bomb-proof as long as they haven't got any sort of crash damage. It's more on condition, so I always buy on condition. So I've bought cars that have got 10,000 miles, and I've bought cars that have got 80,000 miles. and they would both make a suitable donor depending on their condition. So from a buying point of view, yeah, don't go, oh, it's got 20,000 miles, it must be mint, and vice versa. Consequently, I've bought cars that got really low mileage, and when you get into them and get the clams off, they might be shiny on the top, but they weren't great underneath. So
I think that's quite an important thing, really. So one of the questions I was going to ask, and I think it comes down to any car, really, is mileage a major issue on something like that? I think when people look at a 90s British sports car, they might think, yeah, going for a really leggy example is a big red flag. Do they tend to get quite tired after X amount of use, or can it be literally, I've serviced it well over 80, 100,000 miles, it's been looked after, it should therefore be fine?
yeah, I mean, for instance, that example is probably a good case in point, because that's got, I mean, it looks nice and shiny, it's got 90, maybe knocking on 100,000 miles on it. But when we bought that, it was from a guy on the forum, he'd obviously gone through, mechanically knew what was what, and it just, you could see by the file of history, and the parts particularly, because he did quite a bit of work himself, that it was done to a nice standard, and all the bits that would have been needed to be done age related, like bushes on this, they're really light on bushes because they're such a light car. So quite often we'll get cars in for suspension refresh and they've got the original bushes in from 25 plus years old, whereas you would not get that on any other car because they crash, a Porsche, for example, go through bushes in a couple of years or whatever it is, depending on how it's used. So,
wow.
But yeah, going back to the original question, yeah, it's buy with your common sense. Don't just buy a shiny car. Get on your hands and knees. But mileage isn't. Yeah, I wouldn't write one car off versus another one because of mileage.
I see. So obviously, famously, the Elise is a bonded aluminium chassis, but at the back you've got a steel rear subframe.
That's correct.
Is corrosion an issue on the aluminium, and what's kind of rust like for the steel bit at the back?
Okay, so the steel rear subframe is on its own pretty well galvanised. They start to get a little bit furry. Very rarely do I have to sort of take them off and repair those unless there's been a damage. It's more with the interface with the aluminium and the steel.
Right.
That tends to corrode.
I see.
And it's that dissimilar metal, which is the same around the car. So front wishbones, again, the top front wishbones have a similar sort of issue where there's some shims there, they corrode, starts eating into the aluminium. So it's more a case of, if we do have to take a rear subframe off, it's treating the sort of interface between it, which is usually a little steel shim that started to rust. We can clean it up, treat it, neutralise it, and we have a stainless steel shim, which then sort of...
So it's not a, if people are able to identify that, it's not a, that's it, it's done. It's something that is rectifiable.
I mean, I know some specialists even manage to do it in the car in situ, but I prefer to get the rear clam off, have a look at some of those, because not only that interface there is an issue, there's also the rear stays from the roll bar.
Right.
And they corrode quite heavily, so that's actually in some respects more of a problem than the subframe. But basically getting a rear clam off. These cars are now proper classic cars. They're had a service schedule which was ABC, which was rotated every 4 or 5 years.
I see, yeah.
Now I'm getting into doing a 20-year service, which is get both clams off and see what's underneath, and then that'll answer a lot of questions.
I see. Right. So is there anything that, let's say if I've just come to view this on someone's driveway, is that something I could identify by eye, or
yes,
okay.
Yeah. So you could open the boot lid.
Yeah.
You could, depending on which generation it is, the earlier cars had a boot bag that you can sort of just pull back. Some of the later cars are a fiberglass boot, but you're looking down the engine bay into the corners where the stays come off the roll bar. Look in there. Sometimes if it looks a little bit crusty, you can probably get your hand to it and just have a little feel around. But it is able to visual check. But the only way to treat it is to repair it, is to get the clam off.
I think it kind of also goes without saying, we actually see Johnny Smith talk about this on the Smith & Sniff podcast, sponsored by PistonHeads, that if you can get in touch with your, like the Lotus Elise Owners Club, see if there's someone local to you. You might have to pay them a little bit of money, but to get them over to really have a look over the car and just make sure that even if you have missed something, they're going to be Hawkeye and pick it up really quickly.
An inspection on any car, if you're buying it privately, is worth its weight in gold, because it's not usually big money, other than the inconvenience of maybe driving somewhere, worst case scenario. There are some people who come out, I mean, we can't go out anymore because we're just too busy to do that, but we'll take a car in on an inspection. It's an hour long, and basically it's almost like MOT. Under trays off, up in the air, and then we can do that quite quickly because we're going to key points that we know, and then we'll just say, this is okay, that needs to be done, and give you at least a time frame of when those bits would need to be done or not.
Fantastic, man. Very handy. Now, suspension-wise, at the back, I believe the mounts are on the steel
subframe as well. Is that is that kind of a known kind of failing point at all, or are they relatively robust?
Back's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is, as you say, it's top rear wishbones are into the steel subframe, as the bottom one is, and then at the front there's a bracket which that bolts onto the chassis. So again, that's another area that's just plain steel. Sometimes they can corrode quite badly. But again, they're an unboltable piece. So that's unbolt it, either buy a new one or get it refinished. That's quite straightforward.
And what about the brake setup on them? Because I believe they're still a standard, right? So what's the...
Depends on the generation. The very early cars are the MMC brakes.
Right, okay.
So that's the metal matrix brakes. Most of those you'll probably find have been replaced by now because the pads are quite hard to get hold of.
Right.
The discs themselves are silly light and they hardly ever wore out. The way it transferred materials, once the discs grew, which was bizarre, it's probably why they stopped making them, because they realised you couldn't service people's brakes every year. But they were really light, which it was a shame. But sometimes I see a car which has got them, so the red one over there's had some of those on. We're going on track with that, so they've been taken off. So basically they weren't that great in the wet and they weren't that good in really hot, so at a sort of operating temperature. But from 98 onwards, they moved over to steel brakes, which is just a steel plain disc.
I see, right. And a lot easier to source, I imagine, if that's...
They're currently available from sort of aftermarket as well as sort of OEM manufacturers.
Fantastic, right. Okay, is there a way we can actually open up the engine bay and have a nose in there? Because I think now's probably a good time to talk about the engine.
So there's a little T-handle inside the...
Fantastic, right.
Driver's door.
And we'll just...
Yep, and this is a later car. Yeah, it goes in there.
Yeah, cool.
Later car with a plastic boot. The earlier cars had a boot liner and a plastic sort of flap that you held up, which you couldn't see the engine on, which was a bit annoying. But
fantastic.
But there it is in its glory, a little K-Series.
I'm going to beat the continuity people to say, yes, we've pushed the car forward a little bit and we've also got a bigger jack just so we can see in the engine bay better. And have a look at this beautiful K-Series, the heart of the Series 1 Elise, 1.8 litre Rover unit. Properly revvy little thing. However, they do have a reputation for being a little bit chocolatey. Is that kind of what's been the case in your experience? And kind of, is there anything to kind of look out for if an engine's running right, or if there's maybe some work that needs doing to it?
They've got a bad rep. They're not bad little engines. They're really super light for their output. They were designed originally to be in the front of a car, so in the wrong end of a car for a start. 90% of the problems is to do with cooling, because obviously the radiators on the Elise are at the front. Having said that, we're that far along in their sort of age now that most of those head gasket problems have been addressed at least once. Most of them because of a poor quality gasket or the way they used to be made, or the plastic dowels. First time that got sorted out, 9 times out of 10, that's it, you won't need to do it again. I've got customers who've got original head gaskets on a car that's done 100,000+ miles. Yeah. You see people who had a head gasket after 10,000 miles. So, head gaskets go on any car. Yeah. Because of its location and how they were probably driven, they did used to have that reputation. But now, once it's fixed, 9 times out of 10, that's it, unless you've done some overheating damage to them. But I've got customers who, I had to politely tell them they've got a head gasket issue and they'd be driving around daily and didn't even notice.
Have no idea.
They're hardy. They've got very few sensors on them. They're quite hardy little engines, so they'll keep on chugging away even when it's got cappuccino in there. There's no check engine lights come on. But that's not good for them, and then you get overheating, and that causes other problems. But yes and no, they're quite basic. Even if you do have it, it's not a massive. Don't have to take clams off. We can do it in situ. I don't know, if you do things properly, having things everything skimmed and all the parts and labour, it's sort of £700-800 job. So it's not the end of the world.
Which would save you a brand new engine basically in the future if it does go kaput.
Sometimes even doing preemptively, and if a customer's bought a car, we can't find anything in the history that says it's been done, they'll do a preemptive one just for that sort of peace of mind.
I think that makes a lot of sense, really. But if there's no sign of it being done, is there, what's the kind of telltale sign of a head gasket that may be going or has kind of blown?
They can go in any sort of way, really. So there's the very common one, which everyone knows about, which is, I call it a cappuccino, but it's, pill dip step up. It's got a little bit of a milky sort of oily texture in there, or the oil filler cap, or consequently the header tank can start going all cloudy and basically mixing the oil and the water. That's where it's leaking externally and mixing it all up, and then that is a bit more of a cleaning up job, because that's obviously gone all around the radiators, all the pipework, etc. The other way that's lesser known is obviously it can go internally, so you see a drop in the header tank of the coolant, which you shouldn't be using.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a bit grumbly when it starts up in the morning. That means it's leaking internally, burning that off, and then it'll run happy as Larry for a bit, and then you stop it. And that's probably the most dangerous one, because once you get water in there, if it goes catastrophically, you can kill an engine.
That's when the engine goes bang.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, speaking of kind of serviceable items, timing belt.
Yes.
Now, I've read that's also potentially a bit of a weak spot of the engine. How often do they need doing? And any kind of telltale signs that one might be on its way out?
Yeah, I've never seen a timing belt snap, so that's a little bit. So people say, oh, I've never seen that. What can happen is, usually through not being used very much, is the pulley that goes, and it'll slip, and therefore that will cause some internal damage. There used to be, I believe, off the top of my head, it was a 50,000 mile or every 5-year service interval.
Right.
If in your service history when you bought one, it's been done, great. If it's missed one in the last few years, and it's just use a sort of rule of thumb that, if it's done 2,000 miles in a year, it probably doesn't need to be done every 5-6 years. Yeah. So I can extend, or consequently, if you're using it on track a lot more, maybe you'd probably want to increase your service interval. So it depends how the car's used. But technically, every 5 years, and it's not a big expensive job.
Yeah.
A full timing belt kit, including a water pump's like £100 odd worth of parts. So it's a bit of a pig to get into. So it's more labour intensive, because you've got to be in there up and using your hands on backwards to try and get nuts and bolts. So it's a little bit of a contortional thing to get done. But any good specialist will be able to do that in situ, and it shouldn't cost you any more. I think a big C service, which is all the fluids, belts, is about £500. So again, they're not expensive cars to run.
Well, I guess ultimately, at the end of the day, this was a mass-produced engine, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know was there kind of many changes that were done to the Elise engine versus the standard Rover K-Series unit? Is it quite a different engine?
I believe the standard one, the 118 horsepower, is identical.
Yeah.
Lotus then did, as you go through the range, there's obviously the VVC and the 111S. That was a slightly different engine. My experience is they tend to be sort of go almost exactly at 45,000 miles.
Oh, right.
For some reason or another. And then they went with slightly larger inlets, so the Sport 160 had slightly different plenum, which was off the VVC. So they did sort of, as they went through the generations, change ever so slightly, but the core was a Rover block. So,
is it probably good to actually kind of use the 40,000 mile as a good rule of thumb? Because my experience, we're going back years ago now, my brother used to work at an MG Rover dealer when they were a thing, and it did seem as though anything that got to 40,000 miles would start going pop. Yeah. So let's say I know we were kind of saying earlier, they can go on for a huge amount of time. Would you kind of suggest, if it's done 40,000 miles, perhaps hasn't had that work done, just get it done?
If it's done 40,000 miles and is now 25 plus years old, I'd say get it in. It haven't been done recently. Yeah. Relative to what mileage it is, to be honest. If it hasn't been done recently, at least get it inspected. We can take the belts, covers off and have a look. And sometimes sitting there does as much damage as it being used regularly. So again, there's no, it's not an expensive thing to do. If the car's new to you and you can't find any history on it, let's play on the side of caution. Yeah. And, as I said, if you're really unsure, a head gasket would involve, that's what £800 of work would involve doing the belts anyway. Yeah. So, get that all done. Do a preemptive head gasket if you feel it needs it. I can give it a visual inspection and give my experience, but that's over a lot of cars. But sod's law will probably go out and have a head gasket then. But they're not hard to do. It's not as much of an issue as it's probably been made out to be, and you can make it better going forward as well.
Amazing. Great, so that's it for the engine. Let's go and have a look at the interior. But first of all, is the roof an issue at all? Is it leaky? Can it get leaky?
It's an issue putting them on and off, apparently. I've done enough that we get the knack of it. So it's a bit of a tent. There's multiple pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, including the roof. So it just sort of, it's not the easiest thing. Once you've got the knack, they're simple. They can do just their age. It's a canvas roof. Yeah. So yes, the stitching can go at the front. Again, buy with your eyes, have a look. If it's in tatters and looks green and mouldy, then you might need a new roof. Great supply for those Elise parts. They'll do an exchange with some of the bobbins you need at the back. It costs you about £500 for a new roof. They're nice and tight, and they've got a slightly different weather strip seal, so they shouldn't leak too much.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, wow. Yeah, a non-leaky British car. That's quite something.
No, not too bad.
Inside, we open it up. Taking a look inside, Steffen, there's obviously quite a lot of exposed metal down here. Are we looking at a bit of a corrosion hotspot?
Not too much, because obviously the chassis that you can see there, so it's all exposed, nothing's hidden away. The areas that are a problem, which historically were the floors. They're a very thin piece of metal or aluminium, and they used to corrode. Used to have a rubber mat on it, typically get water underneath it, and that would start to oxidise. There was a factory recall, having said that, on those, so they got sorted out quite quickly. I'm not a massive fan of that because it was just a separate piece of aluminium plopped on the top. But
bit of a bodge job.
Sort of, it's hidden and looks shiny, so that was good enough. But yeah, so that's, some cars have that, some cars don't. If it's got rubber mats, original ones, peel them back, just see how, you know, it might look horrendous, but it's easily treatable. Neutralise it. We can either paint it or do whatever treatment you want on it, but I've got a couple of options there. The other one that's not as well known is the pedal box. Again, it bolts into a very thin piece of aluminium, and the interface there where it's riveted with steel rivets can corrode. So typically these days I'm pulling pedal boxes out a lot more than we used to. And then we can, well, pedal boxes out, you can service it as well. It's got rubber, it's got little bushes in there as well. Other than that, it's wear and tear on sort of the fabric, the leather, side bolsters which protect the aluminium when you're sliding in and out, typically get worn out, but they're very easy and cheap to retrim. So this one's had a jazzy interior, been retrimmed, and yeah, and that's quite, you know, you can also individualise the car. So if it has got a standard 90s black leather or cream leather, it's not big money, and there's lots of specialists who can do a nice retrim job and make the whole car look a lot nicer. And while the seats are out, clean it all up, and aluminium can come up like new.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously it's quite a high mileage car. I think the seats and you said the suspension on this are kind of the only real adjustments that have been made. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot else to go wrong in there, is there?
The dash panels sometimes corrode, and they've got a particular finish on them, but again, that's just unbolting it and getting it refinished, which is what we do on the Supersport. So.
And are the electrics kind of okay? They're not a point of issue?
Because it runs through the middle of the car, the two bits that are the worst, there's engine loom can start having issues because it gets hot and it's old and it's exposed to some of the elements. The actual main loom that runs through the centre of the car is quite well protected, so very few issues with that. The stacked dashes sometimes can be faulty, and that can be a bit of an issue because not many people who can repair those. The old Peugeot switchgear can start to get a bit sticky and they're hard to get hold of, but again, some of those you can service or find, you know, it's readily available. Some of them are. Or you can upgrade those. The fuse box is in a silly place, which is on the front left-hand wheel arch.
Oh, handy.
Yeah, so that can, again, but it's a nice simple box, and you can just either replace it or clean up some of the terminals. So typically they're not too bad electrical-wise, which is rare for a British sports car.
Oh yeah, that's almost unheard of. Well, nice. Okay. And just otherwise, I think that's kind of everything I can think of off the top of my head. Is there anything I've missed that you'd kind of want to point out as things people should look at when buying one?
I would recommend, depending, just see if I'm a bit of a stickler for getting the clams off, because again, it hides, you know, that front clam, rear clam, big old lumps, and they do cover up a lot of issues. 9 times out of 10, the alloy radiator, which we haven't talked about, has plastic ends. If it's an original one, they can fail. You'll probably find they've all been replaced by now, but if they haven't, that's definitely worth doing. Have to take the front clam off for that. Steel tow eye right at the front of the car, just steel, they can fail. Have to take the front clam off for doing that. So those are two jobs we do at the same sort of time. And again, both those items aren't big money. It's more the labour of taking the clam off and putting it back on. And the only other thing that runs front to back, which again, I've only recently seen one of, but usually they've been done many years ago, is the clutch line. They had a red plastic clutch line originally, which used to expand in heat and then you lose your clutch. Most of them be done with a braided, but if you're getting one of these nice low mileage cars that hasn't, you know, we saw one recently had 3,000 miles on it and had the original clutch line on it, so we replaced that just for usability point of view. But there are a few little bits, but again, they get into the age there, take clams off, have it fully serviced. Wishbones, they might be coming to the end of life. Suspension refreshes are pretty common. That's bread and butter for us. We'll probably, you know, we've got about 4 cars downstairs that are just in the process of having that done. But it can all be done. It's just knowing where to look. And there's a few little areas that get hidden away, so that's probably why an inspection is quite handy.
So that's what a standard Elise is like and what to look out for. But if you have everything done to the Analogue Automotive standard, you get this, the Elise Supersport, which you've probably read about. This is the heavily reworked and heavily improved Lotus Elise. Steffen, what's the kind of parts difference are we talking about here? Is it kind of 80% new, 90% new over a standard Elise?
The majority, we use a donor car. Obviously, I source those either from customers, got a couple of actually customers come in with their own car, or we supply one, but essentially we'll strip that right back which you may have some pictures on a B-roll of, to the chassis, which is a bare chassis, and we go right back to the bare bones.
Yeah.
We recycle things like the side glass. We'll have a new screen. The clams will be, the bodywork will be recycled, for want of a better word, or refinished. Yeah. And then mechanically, everything is new, either to the same spec if you wanted that. So we've got a couple of more sort of classic builds leaning towards a restoration, or the Supersport, the black one, is wide track, bigger engine, carbon interior, so lots of options. But it's a bespoke product, so you can have it whichever way. So we've got some of the US clients who want to go slightly more classically, so it'll be the original track, and maybe less carbon, but with leather. And there'll be other guys who'll go, see the black car and want a replicator of that.
Absolutely, because it does look so mean and black, and it looks really wide, but I'm correct in saying it is actually no wider than a standard car. It's just the rear track's a little bit beefed out. Right?
Front track. So the body,
front track.
Yeah,
okay.
Bodywork is exactly the same. I think we finished the bodywork to a higher standard, so it makes the sort of the slightly flared arches that they have naturally pop out a little bit more. Whereas on some of the other cars, you don't see it a standard car. But the front track is wider, narrow track car, which is a standard one. They're quite triangular. So it's got narrow front, wider at the back. That's a standard Elise sort of footprint, if you like. Yeah. And we squared that up. So we're just giving it slightly wider track at the front, wider wheels at the back. So it is wider overall.
I see, right.
Than a standard Elise. But it's the front that's been widened up.
But bodywork's the same.
Bodywork is standard, yeah.
So, as we found out earlier, you've been driving and working on Elises for, several decades. It's a car that is hugely, very, very highly renowned for being analog perfection. What was your kind of main focus on improving it? What were the areas you really wanted to work on first? To get to what we have now.
It started with going through the inspiration, which is like Sport 160s, Sport 190s, Exiges, which had sort of sub 200 horsepower engines, making them reliable and drivable. Because if you get in a Sport 190 now, they're quite lumpy. They're not easiest things to drive, quite cammy, hard to start up. So we've made it so it's usable. But the engine, so we've got modern techniques, modern parts in there. Some are bespoke to our engine to get that sort of horsepower out of it. And then consequently, you need to sort out the braking, then you need to sort out the suspension. I wanted something that was a fast road car. So it's not a track car. I mean, it has been on a few editorials where it's sort of up against other track cars, but it's for roads like B roads. We're not stone's throw from Goodwood, so those sort of roads. So it's not too low. It does look low, but it's it's a 20mm drop over a standard car, a bit wider, a little bit. I would say it's got Olin. Well, we've got two options: either Olins or Nitrons on the dampers. So they're a coilover damper, but they're quite softly sprung, so it sort of moves around quite nicely, particularly with our horrible roads. So it was a bit of a one thing leads to another, and to make it whole, I tried to make it cohesive, so it's not just big engine in a standard car, or sticky tyres on a standard car. It's everything's tried to work together, so it feels like a product and a cohesive sort of item rather than just a modified car.
And have you managed to get the weight down of it as well? Because these are already featherweights. How much does... So has this got the fiberglass body on it?
Yes.
So still with that, what are we down to?
Yeah, so this was, it's on our scale, 699, which my target was getting to that sort of weight, which that's what Lotus said it was originally. It's obviously got carbon interior in this one, lightweight alloy fuel tank, our flywheel's a lot lighter, there's, it's lightweight batteries, there's lots of small, it's not one big, take out 50 kilos or whatever it was. The wishbones we use, they're lighter. The wheels on this are probably they're standard Victories. We've got a wheel coming that is lighter. The discs are a lighter Alley-Bell disc. So it's lots of little pieces. With fuel, I think this was recently weighed at a track officially, and it had 30 litres of fuel, and it was 724 kilos.
Wow. It's so very, very light. But there are builds of where the bodywork's been done in carbon as well, right?
Yes, so we've got a carbon body, we've got a few extra external carbon pieces. So we've got a car in project and in progress, which is going to be lighter still.
Probably going to need to tie that down. It's going to be so light. I mean, it'll just fly away.
Have to start.
But what I really kind of want to talk about is the engine, because a lot of people expect that, you see a car like this where a lot of work has been put into it. These weren't making silly amounts of horsepower to begin with. It's obviously, we've got more power coming from here, but you've not turbocharged it, you've not supercharged it. It's still a 4-pot, it's still the K-Series. Yeah. So should we open this up and have a wee look? So what was the thinking behind the engine here? What made you go, let's stick with the K-Series, let's focus on making it the best it can be?
Twofold. I'm a fan of the K-Series. It's a lightweight engine. Also, with the idea of this being exported to places where it wasn't available, like the US, they have a 25-year rule, which means that the original chassis and engine doesn't need to be the matching numbers engine, but needs to be the same specification it came out. So it needs to be a Rover K-Series. And then, I said earlier, with the inspiration like the Sport 160, 190, how much power can we get out of it? Typically now with some sort of modern techniques, independent throttle bodies that don't have great big trumpets and lose your boot, and some ECU work that we've done. We've got our own lumen ECU on this one now. You can make it drivable as well, so it starts up fairly straightforwardly and you can run, it's not too noisy. It's got a sports cat in here, so it will pass emissions. So that sort of 200, 210 level of this car gives you everything. And again, we're sort of nibbling at each edge. We're turning the weight down, turning the power up, giving it more grip, so it sort of starts being a slightly different, if you A/B test these, they feel quite different, hopefully in a nice way. If you want something that's exactly the same as a standard S1, we'll go more down towards a restoration route, and you could have a brand new one of those, or you can tick whichever box you want on this and have it to your, no one we've sold so far has been exactly the same. It's quite a bespoke product, so you get to choose what you want.
Because there's, from the outside, and perhaps for people that aren't familiar with it, it might just look like a Lotus Elise that's been kind of fettled here and there, but this is a nut and bolt. You've 100%. Gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. And so the starting price is, I believe you said 125 plus a donor car, but they're not leaving the showroom at that price, are they? People are paying more.
As we were saying earlier, I've got two options that we've just revised, our sort of 25, 26 price list and options list. Originally we had a sort of a 160 spec engine and a 200. Very few people have ticked the box on the 160. Everyone wants more power. In fact, of the ones we've got in build, 7 of those are more powerful than this one, because people will say, oh, that's nice, but can we do more? Can we do more? And then we get into the nice bit of the interiors and refinishing it and bespoke sort of colours and stuff like that. So, the clients we're getting seem to want a Series 1 Elise either because it's in the collection or it's a one car they used to have and they're buying one back. And now they sort of want things done to a much higher level. They could obviously just go out and buy a Series 1 Elise. We can supply them a bog standard Series 1 Elise. We've got one here for people to drive, just to remember what they are like. And they're fantastic cars, but they probably want a slightly higher specification. And also, that will outlast, this will be here with the finishes and the attention to detail we've gone. My idea is that it will be like that in a good, you won't have to do a suspension refresh on this in 10 years' time.
Well, that's the whole thing really, isn't it? I mean, these cars, obviously they're held to such high esteem, but they are 27 years old now, 28 years old.
Knocking on
and
30.
So, things have moved forward so much. And so really what you've created here is just the ultimate expression of what the original Elise was. Now, I'm a bit of a boy racer at heart. I absolutely adore the Exige. These are extremely rare. I think they made about 600 of them. Could I have this Supersport treatment on an Exige?
Yes, absolutely, I mean, it's something we looked at sort of doing more officially, if you like. They're really hard to find. We've got, that's a standard restoration, albeit with gold wheels, so that's as it came out of the factory. We've got another one that's factory restoration, so that was, just attention to detail, making sure it looks better than it came out of the factory. And then we've got 2 in build that are essentially Supersports, but as an Exige. And I'm constantly looking out for Exiges, but they're one of the ones we bought had a Honda engine in, so we're reverting that. It's interesting. Back in the day they used to take the K-Series out and put Hondas in. And now here we are 10, 15 years later taking K-Series out and, Hondas and putting K-Series back in. So
I can't believe
full
it.
circle. But I think their value is tied up because they're such a rare car. And they have got a bit more presence. But track-wise, for example, the Supersport's very similar to that sort of track, and that had the larger wheels and the larger, wider bodywork to cater for that.
Now, if you're looking for a donor car for your Supersport build, or just want to experience the analog delights of an original Series 1, then be sure to check out PistonHeads Auctions, where you're more than likely to find an Elise or two. We've sold everything from an original 11,000 mile car to an ultra-rare Sport 190. So whether you're looking to grab yourself a slice of sports car history, or fancy moving yours on to its next owner, then PistonHeads Auctions has you covered. Right. Let's see what all the fuss is about with this Supersport then.
Now, normally when we do a buying guide, I'll go and drive the car and point out how important it is and why you should go and buy one. But we've already done that with the Elise S1. We did it a couple of years back, when it won our best performance car of the last 25 years. And as we've been spending the day with Analogue Automotive, well, it'd be a bit rude to not give the Supersport a go, right? Now, if I'm honest, I was a little skeptical when the Supersport first appeared, not least because the Series 1 Elise is just held in such high regard. This was a revolutionary car when it came out in the mid-1990s because it was light and it was simple and it was affordable. So what's the point in spending so much money on a car that you can get for 15, 20 grand? But the more you look into it, the more you realise this isn't just an Elise with some slightly fancier trim and a bit of a racier engine. It is a meticulous going over of a sports car icon. As Steffen says, every nut and bolt of this car has been poured over to see if it can be improved. Now obviously the headlines are you've got Nitron Club Sport suspension that sits 25 millimeters lower to the ground, and the front track is a little bit wider than stock. There's also a Quaife ATB limited slip differential, and they've also changed the ratios of second, third, fourth, and I believe fifth as well. And the result is a car that I thought was going to be crashy and firm and just completely at odds with the standard Elise ethos, but really it just feels as though all the brilliant aspects of the Elise S1 have been amplified to their maximum. Now you won't find many complaining about the steering response in an original Elise, but in this thing, my goodness, just the smallest turn of the steering wheel and the nose just darts to where you're going. But it's not hyper responsive. Now the revised suspension and geometry means there is a little bit more weight to the steering, but it still feels really agile, and it just doesn't require much effort to just tip the nose in. Steffen says the suspension of this car is slightly more set up for track work, so it's firmer than what most people would get in their Supersport, and it just glides over the surface so smoothly. As soon as I see coilovers on any kind of modded car, I just think that's going to be unbearable to live with. But this car has been set up on roads like this. They're based in Chichester, where there's some absolutely great roads around here in Goodwood and all around the surrounding areas. And so the car's not been set up on a racetrack, it's been set up in the areas where you're actually going to use it. It is, however, so loud in here that I've lost my voice after about 10 minutes of driving, so how about I just shut up for a second and we listen to this. One of the things I love about the Supersport is that they've kept the K-Series engine, and they've worked very hard on it. It's got its own crankshaft, racier cams, its own pistons, a carbon inlet, and it sounds utterly glorious. But they've turned it up to just 210 horsepower when you've just got 700 kilos to push along. This is true analog perfection. It's one of the best experiences I've had on four wheels. It's just so rewarding. The big sticking point for people though will be the £125,000 price tag, and that doesn't include a donor car, so really you're 150 grand in. Steffen's saying that his customers aren't spending £125,000–150,000 on a car, they're spending nearly double that, if not more, because they want, in their eyes, the perfect Elise. But the way I look at it is like this. The Elise experience doesn't have a huge cost of entry. It's 20, 25 grand for a good one. It's only if you want the best of the best, you give Analogue Automotive a call and they build you something like the Supersport. It's a steep cost of entry, but what you're getting is the Elise you've always dreamed of, and a slightly croaky voice. Oh boy!